Listen closely for a second. That sound, rain hitting a wooden roof in a steady, uneven rhythm, somehow manages to slow down an entire nervous system in a way almost nothing else can. There is a reason people pay for white noise apps that try and fail to recreate this exact sound artificially. Today we are spending an entire rainy day inside a forest cabin, walking through every detail of what makes this specific kind of stillness feel so good, the science behind it, the design choices that make it work, and the small sensory details most people never stop to notice. Stay with me because by the end of this you might genuinely want to recreate this feeling in your own home tonight. Quick ask before we settle in. Before we get cozy, if rainy day ambience and forest cabins are your thing, go ahead and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who need a slower moment today. Subscribe if you want more ambience and cozy content like this, and let me know in the comments what your personal rainy day ritual looks like. Okay, let us settle in. Why rain sounds do something specific to our brains. Before we walk through the cabin itself, it helps to understand why this particular combination, rain and forest and wood, works on us so reliably. Rain falling on a surface produces what audio researchers classify as a form of pink noise, a sound spectrum that, unlike pure white noise, carries more energy in lower frequencies and tends to feel noticeably softer and less harsh to the human ear. Several sleep and relaxation studies published through 2024 and into 2025 have continued reinforcing what people have intuitively known for generations, that this kind of consistent, unpredictable yet patterned natural sound genuinely lowers measurable stress markers and helps quiet the kind of repetitive, anxious thought loops that silence alone often fails to interrupt. A wooden roof specifically tends to soften and warm that sound even further compared to metal or tile, adding a slightly deeper, more resonant quality that many people describe as feeling almost like a heartbeat for the whole structure. The morning the rain began. It started sometime before dawn, the kind of rain that announces itself gradually rather than all at once, a light patter against the windows that slowly thickened into something steadier by the time the gray morning light started filtering through the trees. Waking up inside a forest cabin to that sound carries a very specific kind of permission with it, permission to move slowly, to stay under the blankets a little longer, to let the day start exactly whenever it actually starts rather than whenever an alarm insists it should. The windows here are old enough to have slightly imperfect glass, the kind that very faintly distorts the view outside, turning the forest into a soft watercolor blur of green and gray rather than a sharp photograph. Condensation builds slowly along the bottom edge of each pane, fogging just enough to blur the individual raindrops into streaks that catch what little light manages to break through the cloud cover. The first fire of the day. Before anything else happens, the fire gets lit, not out of strict necessity since the cabin holds heat reasonably well on its own, but because a fire on a rainy day is less about temperature and more about atmosphere entirely. Dry birch catches quickly, the bark curling and crackling within the first minute, and within 10 minutes a steady, low flame settles into the kind of rhythm that will likely burn for the next several hours with only occasional attention. The smell that follows is doing as much work as the sound at this point, that specific blend of wood smoke and damp earth drifting in faintly from outside whenever the door opens even briefly, a combination that sent researchers studying environmental psychology have noted tends to trigger genuinely strong associative memory responses in most people, often tied to childhood, to safety, to specific places that mattered. Few combinations of smell carry that much emotional weight as efficiently as fresh rain and burning wood together. The sound of rain on a wooden roof versus everything else. It is worth pausing here on something most people never consciously notice, how dramatically different rain sounds depending on what it happens to be falling on. Rain on a metal roof tends to produce a sharper, more percussive sound, individual drops registering as distinct clicks and pings. Rain on tile or asphalt shingle falls somewhere in the middle, slightly softer but still fairly direct. Rain on a thick wooden shake or shingle roof, the kind most traditional forest cabins use, gets absorbed and softened by the wood fibers themselves before the sound ever reaches the inside of the structure, producing that deeper, more diffuse hush that so many people specifically associate with cabin ambience rather than rain in general. Underneath that primary roof sound sits a whole secondary layer most people only notice if they really stop and listen. Individual drops falling from the eaves onto the ground below, a slightly different and slower rhythm than the steady wash overhead, plus the much quieter sound of rain moving through actual leaves outside, a soft, almost static-like rustle that shifts subtly every time the wind picks up even slightly. A slow breakfast with nowhere to be. The kitchen on a morning like this becomes less about efficiency and more about ritual. Water goes into a kettle on the wood stove rather than an electric one, partly for the genuine off-grid practicality many forest cabins still rely on, and partly because the slower process, waiting those extra several minutes for the kettle to properly whistle, fits the unhurried mood of the day far better than the rapid press of a button ever could. Coffee gets made the old-fashioned way too, often with a simple pour-over setup, the slow bloom and drip taking just long enough to stand there and watch the rain through the kitchen window without feeling like time is being wasted. There is something quietly significant about a rainy cabin morning, specifically removing the cultural pressure towards speed and productivity that governs most other mornings. Nobody decorating or designing a cozy cabin morning around rain is trying to optimize anything. The entire point is the opposite of optimization. The window seat and the book that finally gets finished. Every cabin like this seems to have one particular spot that becomes the default rainy day location, and it is almost always a window seat or a deep armchair position close enough to glass to watch the forest while staying completely dry and warm. A half-finished book that has been sitting on a nightstand for weeks suddenly becomes genuinely appealing again on a day like this, not because anything about the book changed, but because rainy days uniquely seem to grant permission for stillness that other days quietly withhold. A wool blanket gets pulled over bent knees, a mug gets refilled at least twice over the course of an hour, and the rain outside continues at roughly the same steady pace it started at, occasionally picking up into something heavier for 10 or 15 minutes before settling back into its baseline rhythm. Watching individual raindrops race each other down a window pane has remained, against all the sophistication of modern entertainment, a genuinely satisfying way to lose 20 minutes without noticing. The forest outside in the rain. Stepping briefly onto a covered porch, just far enough to stay dry but close enough to feel the temperature shift and the faint mist carried on the air, the forest itself looks completely different in rain than it does in sun. Colors actually deepen rather than fade, the greens of moss and pine needles becoming more saturated rather than washed out, since wet surfaces reflect light differently than dry ones. Mushrooms that were invisible the day before suddenly appear at the base of several trees, rain being one of the most reliable triggers for fungal fruiting bodies to emerge from the forest floor practically overnight. The sound out here is fuller and more three-dimensional than it was from inside, rain hitting hundreds of individual leaf surfaces at slightly different times and angles, creating a layered, almost textured wall of sound rather than the single steady hush heard from indoors. A few birds remain stubbornly active despite the weather, their calls cutting through occasionally, proof that the forest itself does not pause for rain even when the humans inside the cabin happily do. The afternoon slowdown. By early afternoon, the rain has settled into its most consistent rhythm of the day, no longer building or easing dramatically, just a steady, dependable wash that has become almost unnoticeable in the way truly consistent background sound eventually does. This is typically when the deepest, most genuine rest of the day happens, often an actual nap, something that feels almost impossible to justify on a sunny, demanding day but feels completely natural here. The fire has been fed once or twice more by this point, settling into glowing embers between feedings rather than constant active flame, radiating a steady, lower-intensity warmth that fills the room without requiring much attention at all. Light through the windows has stayed in that same soft gray register since morning, removing the usual visual cues, the shifting angle and color of direct sunlight, that normally mark the passage of an afternoon, which contributes to that pleasantly disorienting sense that time on a rainy cabin day moves differently than it does anywhere else. Evening and the second fire. As actual darkness begins settling in earlier than usual, hastened by the heavy cloud cover, the fire gets built up properly for the evening, larger logs added now rather than the smaller kindling pieces favored earlier. Candles get lit around the room, not out of necessity since the cabin does have electric lighting, but because warm, flickering candlelight pairs with rain sound in a way that overhead electric light simply does not match. Dinner tends to lean toward something slow-cooked, a stew or a simple braised dish that has likely been quietly simmering on the wood stove for several hours already, filling the cabin with a smell that mixes with the wood smoke into something that feels deeply, specifically like comfort rather than just food. Eating dinner by candlelight and firelight while rain continues steadily against the windows outside creates one of those moments that photographs and videos can approximate but never fully capture, because so much of the experience lives in temperature, in smell, in the felt sense of being warm and dry while something larger and wetter continues just beyond the glass. Why this specific combination has become so popular online. It is worth acknowledging directly why rainy cabin ambience content specifically has exploded across platforms through 2025 and into 2026. Search and viewing data tracked by several digital media analysts covering relaxation and ambience content has shown consistent year-over-year growth in this exact category, rain sounds paired with cozy interior visuals, outperforming many other relaxation content formats. The explanation researchers and content analysts have generally converged on tracks closely with broader conversations around screen fatigue and chronic overstimulation, meaning a growing number of people are specifically seeking out content that asks nothing of them, no plot to follow, no information to absorb, just a sustained, low-stakes sensory environment they can sit inside for a while. A rainy forest cabin happens to deliver exactly that combination of sound, warmth, and visual stillness more completely than almost any other single setting. The quiet lesson a day like this teaches. There is something worth taking away from a day like this beyond simple relaxation. Modern life rarely grants explicit permission to slow down without some external excuse: illness, exhaustion, a holiday calendar. A rainy day inside a forest cabin offers that permission almost automatically, the weather itself making the decision for you, removing any guilt or negotiation from the equation entirely. That might be the real reason this specific kind of day, and this specific kind of ambience content resonates with so many people right now. It is not really about the rain or the cabin at all. It is about finally having a legitimate reason to stop. From the first quiet patter before dawn to a slow candlelit dinner with the fire settled into embers, a rainy day in a forest cabin offers something genuinely rare: full permission to do absolutely nothing and call it exactly enough. If this gave you a few minutes of real calm or made you want to recreate even a small piece of this at home tonight, subscribe for more cozy ambience and cabin content just like this. Let me know in the comments what your own rainy day ritual looks like, and I will see you in the next video.